You might have terrific goals set for your team, expectations that are solid, strategies that are great, tactics that are awesome, but when communication sucks, none of this is going to matter. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. I am Ethan. Got a goodly episode for you today. Hey, quick favor before we get rolling here. If you've been loving this podcast, or even just mildly enjoying it, it's kind of like, it's a decent podcast. If that's you, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You should see a follow button in either the left-hand or right-hand corner of the podcast page, depending on the platform. Look, I promise you that it takes less time to subscribe to our podcast than deciding what you're going to watch on Netflix tonight. And honestly, it will probably improve your life by at least 0.7%. Maybe even more. By the way, subscribing, following the podcast means that you will never miss an episode. And let's be real, who wants the FOMO of missing out on all this quality content? Plus, it helps more people find this show, and let's face it, who doesn't want to be a part of an exclusive club of podcast listeners who are clearly smarter than the rest? So, go ahead and subscribe now. And if you really want to be a legend, you can even leave us a review. Make me blush with your kind words. I love flattery. Or roast me gently. Either way works. All right. Thanks a ton, and now back to the good stuff, which today I'm going to give you some quick hitting things on the manager's role with information distribution. First off, I just want to say that usually when we do any sort of engagement, employee surveys with organizations, or do any sort of data collection, one of the top things that we hear from employees is, we want more communication, right? Communication needs to be improved. Yet when we ask managers, they say, we're communicating really well. And I don't think either is wrong. I just think there is often a disconnect between what employees want with communication and what managers think they want with communication. Oftentimes, a manager's solution to hearing we want more or better communication is to send more emails, which usually doesn't fix the issue. What needs to happen here is getting on the same page with what quote-unquote good communication looks like within your team or your organization. Now, as I'm sure we all understand, communication is going to have an impact on the morale of your team. And if you listen to this podcast regularly, you understand that morale is super, super important for getting all those cool things from our team that we can't pay people for and we can't punish people for, such as engagement. So the impact of communication on morale, it affects employee morale in areas such as reducing confusion, right? That's a big impact on morale. And when confusion is reduced, that impacts our performance. Okay. Other impacts of morale in relation to communication. Poor communication could reduce one's connection to the organization's mission, vision, and values, which can start to erode employee engagement. Poor communication can lead to this feeling of being left out of key decisions and conversations. By the way, one of the top things that employees say they want in the workplace, one of the most important things for them in the workplace is a sense of being in on things, meaning being involved in decisions that affect them and their job, or just knowing things about what's happening around them that have an impact on their job. Bottom line here, folks, is that ultimately poor communication impacts the culture, which can impact morale, which it can often lead to things like disengagement, which we really don't want. So communication can be the conduit for all the things that happen in an organization that are cool. You might have terrific goals set for your team, a terrific vision, expectations that are solid, strategies that are great, tactics that are awesome, plans that are extremely sound. But when communication sucks, none of this is going to matter. Look, we get this. Being successful at the organizational level requires some level of coordination. And how do humans collaborate and coordinate? Through communication. So, first principle here is that as a manager, as a leader of a team, an organization, etc., you need to embrace your role as an information curator and being active about curating information for your team, not passive. The principle is that it's your job to ensure that employees know what they need to know. And to do this, we need to take an empathetic approach. And what I mean by that is we have to be able to get out of our own bubble and think from our employees' perspectives. What do they need to know? And not only what do they need to know, what do they want to know? As managers, if we can adopt the mindset of, hey, I tell you everything I can versus I tell you only what you need to know, we are going to be in a much better place with our information distribution practices. So, all that said, what we want to do here then is take a 30,000-foot view of our team and organization and consider what are the various sources of information that comes to me as the manager. And with this information, how do I filter it in an effective way to my team, to my employees? Right? So this is about tactical filtering. Your job is not to just dump all the information on your team through 152 different emails throughout the day. We have to strategically filter and organize it so that it's digestible. So I want you to imagine this. You as a manager, you have this funnel sitting on the top of your head, right? Wide open at the top of the funnel, narrow. It gets narrow as it goes further down. At the top of the funnel, this is where you collect all the different sources of information coming to you. So think about this. What goes into this funnel? What are the key information sources that come to your desk, to your plate as a manager? So to simplify this, we have 4 kind of main sources of information that would go into your funnel. The first one is your own stuff as a manager, right? Hey, what's on your plate? What do you need to communicate based on just being the leader of this team? What are your priorities? Number 2 is your manager stuff. So information that your manager has tasked you with sharing, and they might have got that information from their manager, and so it starts to filter down. So you have your own stuff, you have your manager's stuff, and number 3 is you also have stuff from horizontal stakeholders. So information coming from other departments, teams, partners. This might even include information from customers, stuff like that. And then number 4 is kind of a catch-all. We'll just call this the rain of emails. So the continuous email traffic, with updates, information coming from various sources. So these four sources of information, your own stuff, your manager stuff, horizontal stakeholder stuff, and the rain of emails, all of this stuff is going into your funnel that's sitting on the top of your little head. Well, I guess, yeah, you might not have a little head. I tend to have a little head. My high school coach, in fact, described my head as a pinhead. Anyways, I digress. So all these sources of information have now come into your funnel. Nice job. You collected them. Now you got to figure out how you want to strategically filter this information out. What we probably want to avoid is just sending an email for every piece of information that we have. Right? We all have tons of email, and just getting more and more email does not make communication more effective. In fact, it tends to make it less effective. And I know that's not a shocker to most of you. But let's think about this. You need to now filter this information and communicate it to your entire team. So, what are the various group communication mediums we can use? Again, how does the information exit the funnel? So I have 10 different possibilities, 10 different communication mediums that could be used. So let me list them all, and then we'll talk about which ones might be more effective and less effective for group communication. So number one, we'll just call this spontaneous emails. Emails at any time of the day, you get it. Number two, we'll call this regularly scheduled emails. So maybe, once a week, you send out an email to the team with a variety of different information in it. Number three, meetings, right? Actual team meetings that you're having. Number four, how about just word of mouth? Number five, one-on-one meetings. In person, on the phone, this could be just through text, but one-to-one communication. Number six could be a memo. And I know some of you are thinking, what the hell is a memo? Remember memo? That paper thing that we used to use? Number seven is a posting. Those flyers that get stuck in the break room or in the bathroom stall. You know what I'm talking about. Number eight, we'll call this a group texting platform. One group texting platform. Number nine, we'll call this the newsletter. Number 10, we'll call this the intranet posting board, so your internal website to post things on. So those are 10 different possibilities for communication mediums to use to filter the information out to your entire team. Now, the question for you here is, which methods of delivering important information to your entire group or team are not going to be effective? Think about that for a moment here. In fact, pause the podcast and think, out of these 10 that I listed, which will be effective for group communication and which will probably not be as effective for group communication? Okay, so let me start with this. I will tell you the five out of 10 of these communication mediums that I've listed that I find to be not so effective, with a few caveats. The first one that's not super effective is word of mouth. And maybe for obvious reasons, maybe not. But of course, word of mouth is pretty inconsistent. And it leads to a lot of miscommunication. Right? Let's just agree that information that everybody should know on your team is not best done through just kind of the word of mouth thing. All right, so let's rule that one out. The second one that might not be super effective for group communication is, this could be surprising for you, one-on-one meetings. And why do you think one-on-one meetings might not be the most effective form for group communication? The main reason here, for me anyways, is that one-on-one conversations and communicating information that everybody needs to know that way can create some fairness issues if some critical information isn't first shared with the entire group at once. If I'm in a one-on-one conversation with somebody, I might explain something differently from one person to the next, or in one of my one-on-one meetings, somebody has a bunch of questions that get answered, and the other one, all of those don't get answered. Or obviously, I can't have my one-on-ones all at the same time, hence them being one-on-one conversations. And so I might have a conversation with one person, and before I can have a conversation with the 10th person on my team, information starts to get out, and people are feeling like, why did I not know about this? Why do you know about this and I don't? So generally, one-on-ones are not the place to start for group communication. They're a really great communication medium for following up on things that you've already communicated with the whole group, but not the place to start. Okay, so we've ruled out word of mouth. We've ruled out one-on-one conversations. Let's mostly rule out memos. So some of you might remember memos, and I'm sure some of you might still get memos, but it's remember that paper thing that we used to use? So someone would print out a memo and maybe put it on your desk or in your mailbox in the office. Now, if we all work in the office on a day-to-day basis, that could actually be a pretty effective and loud piece of communication. So this all depends on the context. But for both memos and postings, which I'll talk more about in a moment, it just comes down to the expectations and the context. For example, if we work with a lot of public utility districts, they have employees that work out in the field, not really in the office. So a memo that is handed to them maybe at the start of the day could be an effective use of communication. But for people that are not in the office every day, so on and so forth, it just might not be the best way to communicate information that employees should be responsible for knowing. And so this also includes postings, right? Flyers that get posted up on the wall for people to see. Again, it depends on the context. But I would just say this. When things are just posted up around the office or like in the bathroom stall, it's hard to hold people accountable for that information because they might miss it. And look, we can't really hold people accountable for information that they read while in the bathroom. It just doesn't work that well. But if we're all in the same building together, we all work in the office every day, and say there's a manager's message board, and we've trained everybody to look there every day, and we've created that expectation, great. Go for that. For example, in hospitals and on nursing teams, they might have a board where they post the schedule for the week or the month or something like that. That might be an effective use. But again, I've seen managers who just start hanging stuff all over the place in the break room, in the bathroom stall. Once again, nobody feels accountable for things that they read, over the urinal. But telling them to look at a communication board every day might work. So we might have to rule out memo, we might have to rule out posting, depends on the context. Okay, so we've ruled out word of mouth, one-on-one meetings, possibly memos, possibly postings. I would also rule out something like the newsletter. So newsletters, the vibe that the newsletter kind of brings is that these are kind of like fun information, nice to know information. They might be great for morale building, but not really ideal for critical information. For example, right, what if we chose to use newsletter for critical information that people need to know, but we're also using the newsletter for fun things. For example, hey folks, so-and-so in this department has puppies for sale. Go talk to her if you're interested. By the way, here's another thing in the newsletter. There's a picnic coming up for anybody that wants to join. And then also, here's the new HIPAA requirements that we all need to understand. Right? So when we start mixing these things together, it's not a super effective way to communicate information that people are needing to be accountable for. So again, I would rule out word of mouth, one-on-one meetings, memos, postings, maybe the newsletter. But let's talk about the sources that could be effective for information that people need to be accountable for. Spontaneous emails, they probably just need to happen from time to time. Like, I actually need to communicate this today. All right, that's fair. Let's set the expectation that people need to be held accountable for information that was shared through spontaneous emails. But, and a big but here, I think you should also consider having what we call just a regularly scheduled email. So for us on the Nash team, we have a weekly Friday email that goes out to the whole team. And we've created the expectation that you should be finding an email every Friday, and you need to be responsible and accountable for the information there. And the cool thing about this is that we actually can save up stuff over the course of a week and then send it all at once. So people get one email rather than 6 or 7 different emails throughout the week. So what I need to know is going to be in that email at the end of every week. So I really like the regularly scheduled email as a way to communicate the information people need to know. Meetings, group meetings. Again, another great way to communicate information that people need to know. Now, how about a group texting platform? Sure, if you've set the expectation that people need to be accountable for information from a texting platform like Teams or whatever other type of texting platform you might use in the workplace, totally good. With the understanding that you need to have a group texting platform, not multiple. If we have multiple group texting platforms going on, it's just not going to work. So choose one if you're going to make this a medium for communicating information that people need to know. The last one here is the intranet posting board. That might be a good place to post things that people need to know. Bottom line here, folks, is that the principle is that we need to make intentional decisions together as a team or as an organization on which methods are going to be used for information that people need to be accountable for. You can't just be random with this stuff. Let's choose a few mediums and create the expectation. Come here for information that you need to know. Now, one of the main points here that I'm alluding to and circling around is that, of course, you as a manager are responsible for communicating what employees need to know, and you're responsible for communicating that information through the agreed upon communication channels for important information. But you need to understand, you need to help your employees understand that they have responsibilities too. It's actually a job performance requirement that all your employees access the information you provide. They too are accountable for the information. So you can see why it's going to be first critical to establish the maybe few communication channels that they need to go to, and then set the expectation that they need to go here for the information they need to know. Okay? So now when an employee says something like, well, hey, I didn't know I needed to know that. You can say, well, okay, did I post it on the 1 or 2 channels that we agreed that we would post information you needed to know? Yes, you did. Okay, so now let's course correct for next time. On the other hand, if they said, I didn't know I needed to know that, and you said, well, okay, did I post it on our communication channels we agreed upon? And you found out you didn't. It's like, okay, now me as a manager, I need to make a course correction here. So you're responsible for communicating the information they need to know through the agreed upon channels, and your employees have responsibilities too for accessing and knowing that information, which again is another reason why you can't just be random with how you filter the information out. Another tip here. This is just called the 2-medium rule. It's as simple as it sounds. When possible, try to share information that people need to know through at least 2 mediums. For example, every Friday, I am sending out a team email. Everybody needs to be accountable for that information. And in our weekly team meeting, I will quickly review those items from the Friday email and open up an opportunity for questions, dialogue, so on and so forth. So the 2-medium rule, it just helps make sure that things don't get missed. Now, the other thing to be aware of here is just about confidentiality as a manager. So we need to find a balance between transparency and confidentiality with the information we share with our employees. And so have a conversation with your team about this. Be real about the information that you can't really share with everybody, right? So we can remove the guessing game by just putting it out there. hey, these things, just given my role as a manager, I of course need to hold these things confidential. The thing here is that too much confidentiality can breed mistrust, but too little confidentiality can also cause problems and breed mistrust. So if you share too little, it's going to be a problem. And you need to be someone people can trust with information, from bottom up to top down. So again, the best practice here is have a proactive conversation with your team about what information can be shared openly and what needs to remain confidential. Adopt the mindset of I share everything I can rather than I only share what's necessary. So be generous with your information. People should understand that you're not going to hoard information and understand that you must maintain some confidentiality. So normalize the idea that not all things can be shared. And think about this. Like what? Like legal matters, medical information of people, maybe business changes that are not ready for distribution, private information about employee accommodations, complaints that employees ask to remain confidential, those type of things. If you just put it out there that you are not going to share these things for the sake of confidentiality, you'll create some trust. And once again, the mindset of, I share everything I can. All right. So, folks, let's bring this home. What I'm going to encourage you now to do is have an intentional conversation with your team about information distribution practices. During this meeting with your team, and by the way, send these questions out to them in advance to let the processors process, but you might consider exploring and asking these questions with your team. First one is, what communication methods should we be using? Meaning, what are maybe the couple communication methods that we should be using for information that we all need to be accountable for? Another question to ask, what information do you want more of? Additionally, what information do you want less of? It's both. More information is not always better. The right information is better. Another question to ask is, how can I or how can we improve in this general area of information distribution? The other question to ask is, what information would you like me to get for you from other parts of the organization? And then again, included in this conversation is a conversation about the balance between transparency and confidentiality. So have this conversation with your team, folks. I think you'll be better off for it, and I hope it goes well. That's all I have for you today, and we will see you here next time.